Okay. So this is our third, and I think what will probably be our final subcommittee meeting, building off our main task force meeting that we had on education as well. So I think we just had a couple of meaty maybe agenda items this morning. One, I wanted to mention, I'll quickly kind of go over a couple of kind of a couple of questions that we want to probe after we do a little bit of a recap. So I'll talk about that in just a second. And then maybe do a little bit of recap of where we are so far. So through two meetings, recently did an update for the chairs. And so I thought kind of assess where we are after these meetings so far. So let me mention the kind of the questions first to give you kind of a chance to think about that while I do the update piece. And I think we're at that stage now where you know we've got great use cases, we've got great examples. I think we've done a really good job of addressing the questions and the cross-cutting questions, and we've talked about pieces of them, and now it's kind of like tying them all together. And so what I'd love to do is go around after I do this kind of quick update and just hear from everyone. You know, what are the two, three most important things that you think we need to recommend? We've talked about them in bits and pieces through our three kind of gatherings, and so let's focus in and get maybe a little bit more specific there. Any questions on that? I'll do a little bit of recap, and then we'll come back and we'll kick it off. So again, we're about you know, this is our third meeting. We've had the main task force meeting. Had a chance to look at, you know, kind of our discussion so far and notes. Really think again we're very well positioned to answer all of our questions. We've got some really great Maine-based examples and use cases in all of the places. So again, as I mentioned to the chairs, the great thing about this is we're not relying on something really great that we heard in New Jersey or California or something. We heard it in East Grand, and we heard it in York and all over the state, and I think that's exciting. If I look at kind of again start to dive into some of the questions, and I think, you know, again, we've heard lots of great examples of ways that we're using that in Maine to improve learning outcomes. And we talked about some of those at our last meeting: personalized learning and writing feedback systems. A lot of the ones that we heard in that Maine education meeting. We heard administrative use cases in K-12 in that meeting, and I brought up several that we're doing in higher education. Question two, when we started talking about preparing the workforce, we had a great discussion, I thought, last time about those core skills, and we've talked about assessing bias and accuracy, environmental impact, and foundational learning and critical thinking. I think Beth started a great conversation last time talking about you know, this challenge of learning and with AI, in spite of AI, and why do I need to learn this if AI can give me the answer right away? So some good pieces there. Lots of conversations about the supports necessary. Professional development in all forms. We use specific examples of teacher to teacher and Zoom trainings, and talked about some potential one-stop resource sites. Looking at the cross-cutting questions, again, I think we blended those in as well. We've talked about the proactive bias education. We've talked about that need for foundational learning. We talk about human in the loop nearly at every step. So again, I think we've got pieces of all of those, and so it's just tying them and getting more specific. And so, Dan, any table setting you want to do or anything before we just open it up, and let's hear what folks are thinking?
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is just a note on timelines here. As I think most folks will have heard many times at this point, but just to say again, the final recommendations to the governor and the legislature are due at the end of October. We will, following this call, have a short sort of break through the month of August and then come back as a larger task force at the beginning of September to consider the recommendations that this group and the 5 other groups have pulled together over the last couple of months. So largely what we are, I think, looking for out of today's meeting is really to get as sort of specific and concrete as we can, so that when we over the next month or so as staff begin to synthesize these points into a sort of something resembling a cohesive draft, we can we can pull out some specific potential policy recommendations that the task force can consider when we come back in the early fall. So I'll just continue again to put in a plug for any sort of specific policy recommendations that we can pull out here. I think are going to be really valuable as we continue this fine-tuning process.
Okay. So I'm going to throw out one just to get us started, and it's half baked, but it is the concept around professional development. You know, for us at the university system, we think that's core, and we've started that work of kind of providing that foundational knowledge to all of our staff. I know Beth talked about that at the last meeting, and so I think that's so critical. What I don't know, what I haven't kind of figured out in my own mind anyway, is how individualized that is. That is it the higher ed institutions figuring out their own piece, and K, the department leading a K-12 one? Is it more integrated than that? I'm not sure what it is, but I know I feel like it's 100% necessary. And I am a little interested, so maybe I'll ask Beth to react first, but what we're doing now. So I know at the university system, I don't want to say we're winging it, but we're coming up with ideas and we're implementing as fast as we can, and we fire up a Zoom and we get 200 people on that, and we hope they go and talk to 200 more people, and so on. I suspect the department's a little more organized than my haphazard piece, but let's start there, and then I'd love to hear other thoughts around professional development.
Yeah, I mean, this was my one of my first recommendations as well, Ryan. So it's a great place to start. I think currently this past school year anyway, we're working with, we had requests from 100 schools to work around professional development, to provide professional development training around AI. Use, integration, pitfalls, bias, ranging, and also develop, so the department has an interactive AI guidance and toolkit that is really exciting, and will continue to get some nationwide attention here. The commissioner's been requested by other commissioners from other states to use and share it in their state. So it's a real model for high quality guidance versus the sort of what a lot of people saw was a document that kind of just wrote, here's what you should be careful of, is something that really people can interact with, has been really successful. So that's sort of what's happening now as far as like,
Can you tell me a little bit more about that one, Beth? Just I'm interested more in the toolkit piece, like what.
Yeah, and I'm very bad at talking and getting something, so I'll put the link in a second. But it's we worked for a long time on it while a lot of states were putting out, like I said, like a page or a few 1 or 2 pagers on kind of like best use. And it really walks you through the many different roles of school that a school person might be in, and then how they can. It provides right in there training around different aspects of AI, as well as sort of things to consider. So really it's the kind of thing, Ryan, I would suggest, and we'll put the link in, like just clicking around, because it's got a little AI guide, and it really is very self-aware. Thank you, Dan. It's really self-aware of the AI use in creating it and where you're interacting with it. But it's huge. It will take a while, but you can start clicking through to kind of get a sense. But it's been overwhelmingly popular as far as an actual asynchronous tool that has been really useful. And the feedback we're getting from educators is very appreciative, because it's in the moment. You can't always, as you know, we have lots of educators signing up to say, I want to learn more about this. I don't know anything, or I think I want to use it, the curiosity. But then in the moment or when they're planning or late at night, they don't have all the access to that. And so it's a one place where they can go and get a lot of support. So yeah, I know it's just really like a very brief overview of that, but I think if you dig into it, it starts to be really clear on how comprehensive it is.
Are you finding that the content generally I mean, this content changes so fast, but the principles are generally staying the same. So are you finding that you don't have to refresh it like daily, that it generally kind of sticks for a while at least?
Yeah, in the design, that's what we're really trying for, is how do you talk about those sort of overarching principles that aren't changing, sort of that are guidelines and guidance, without referring to a specific program or a specific, because those are changing daily and we'd have to be updating. Now, having said that, because of its interactive nature and not the sort of, produce it one time and let it sit on a shelf, is that we can go in quite easily and tweak and add and adjust as things are moving and changing, and we're already doing that. And also, quite honestly, as we're getting feedback on usability and different pieces of what people really liked, and I was confused about this part, so we can make those tweaks on the fly, and it's a live link always, so you're always getting the most updated, newest version of that. So yeah, I think that's been helpful. And I think in the design, we've really tried. And I think that's key when you're doing any of this PD, is zoning in on some of those bigger overarching principles.
And I'll
Other
just,
reaction to this? Ruth, yeah.
yeah, no, I'll just reiterate that, I was very excited to hear the first recommendation being more professional development and availability of that, both through the department and partners like nonprofits and universities, because there's a lot available out there. And this is certainly what we're hearing educators asking for. So I'd be keen to think through what that, the specifics of that recommendation could look like. But I agree. I think that's part and parcel and the core of what we really need to be pushing.
Yeah, can I ask Beth, maybe for again, in the interest of sort of getting to what will end up hopefully in a final report here, is there like a version 2.0 of this that would be helpful for the task force to be a champion for, and for the task force to continue to push for? Is there another set of activities to build on this great sort of toolkit that we can advocate for the task force to adopt, and for therefore the state to continue to adopt? I just, again, trying to narrow down into what sort of comes out of this work. And it's great. I think Ryan said it perfectly at the beginning. We've got all these fantastic examples, both at the classroom level, at the state level, at the nonprofit and academia level. And it's sort of like, well, how can we continue to build and grow and double down and become smarter and equip our educators better? So just curious if that brings anything to mind.
Yeah, I mean, I really think that it's continuing to build out, and I mean, not some, I know he said it, the professional development for educators, but really, and I think in our recommendation, like I would suggest that we really keep it a prioritization of, human-centered AI integration in teaching and learning, that gets at kind of what you talked about, I talked about last time, Ryan, is like, the role AI's role in teaching, learning, assessment, the things we do in the classroom, but emphasizing both the potential and the pitfalls in what we're designing, so that it doesn't become, so that it keeps that human-centered piece, and developing, support for developing guidance and exemplars for integrating AI that enhances, not replaces, critical thinking, creativity, human judgment. Like, really, I think our recommendation being specific in that way, and encouraging the use of AI tools for instructional design, feedback loops, personalized learning, like we heard from the panel, with safeguards against bias and surveillance and other pieces that we know are in there. And so, we know that AI is reshaping education perhaps. And so I think focusing our professional learning recommendation on intentional design, we don't want to amplify inequities or like erode the human piece of that. And so how do we keep our recommendations really centered on the teacher and the learner and that human-centered piece of that? Because that will allow us, because I think we have this toolkit. Now it's really about helping schools understand the resource and then take it to that next level, because the toolkit will get you in the door, but then, as like we know with all things in education, that in the moment coaching and instructional support is so key for individualized education, and depending on what they're doing in their classroom at the time. So I hope that gives you a little bit more concrete. I don't know, but if you want to probe more, but I'm sure other people have ideas.
And do we have any lesson plans on what would be the next step for educators in K-12, especially for example, there's an example in the toolkit, develop a real-world AI project using AI to analyze climate data. Do we have lesson plans for
We certainly do across many different sectors, both as examples that have been educator designed through the work that Beth has been doing through the Workforce Ready 2030 project. We also have educator designed AI related and AI integration curriculum and lesson plans. And then also we just last week completed the CS Summer of Fun, which brought together over 150 educators, and about 50 of them participated in our AI Everyday task force, our project with Kate, who we actually had on the panel. So she and her team came up and provided fantastic training to a ton of our educators that were participating in that. Now they have access to her curriculum as well, trained, and we're going to provide ongoing support throughout the year. So yes, there certainly are examples, and if we could find ways to add to that and get even more people through those support networks and trained in how to utilize those curriculum, that's where you need to go.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's great.
And I think we really focus on, because of course the state doesn't provide curriculum. That's a local responsibility that people take very seriously in Maine. And so, we focus on providing exemplars and models so that people can see it in action, but don't feel like it's a set curriculum that they need to use or how they need to use that. And so we also really value and highlight, educator to educator professional learning. And so how do we, and I think, the examples that Ruth has shared, how do we help build the capacity of educators and teacher leaders that want to raise up, because we have tens of thousands of educators in the state, and how do we feasibly ensure that kind of support? And so, building into the professional development that we do, building a model that is around, training people who can then be coaches that we can focus on, that then they go back into their district or into their school and really are able to provide that in the moment support. We, of course, have a team. There's others like Ruth's organization and the university and others who can provide that kind of outside coaching and support. But how do we use that, build a model where we have educators in their districts who are able to then give that ongoing support. And I would provide, a financial incentive to be able to do that. And so that there's, a position. So an educator, we're not asking more of a full-time teacher to then also do this role, but then, either to reduce that teaching load and get a stipend, or however the model we might look at, could really incentivize their participation in our work to create this cohort of coaches and leaders, instructional leaders, teacher leaders, but then also allow it to actually be feasible and equitable, and not just around the SAUs who are able right now to do that financially.
Yeah, 100% agree. And the one thing I also want to caution that we just did discuss last time, and I think Beth is certainly talking about as well, is just the caution away from the AI tutors. So kind of really leaning into the human aspect of teaching and not moving towards a computer as a teacher, I think will be really important. I don't know how to discuss that in the recommendations, but perhaps some of the nuance that Beth was talking about.
I also
Okay.
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was kind of going to move on from in addition to professional learning as a recommendation, but if you want to stay on professional learning, I want to that move on.
I'm sort of, again, I'm just trying to, I'm thinking in some ways about where some of the other groups are landing on some of their recommendations and how some of their ideas might be able to be translated a little bit into the context that we're talking about here. And I think there's one that is an interesting idea here around, there's a program run through the state level called the Community Resilience Partnership that works with municipalities to do basically sort of needs assessments around resilience funding and planning funding. And I wonder if there's a potential for a recommendation out of this group. And I guess I should say the public sector work in thinking about working with municipalities is debating, can we replicate that around needs assessments around using AI to sort of improve operations and just the sort of daily business. And I wonder if there's a version of that is not restricted to municipal governments, but also includes school systems, districts, as sort of assessing readiness for incorporating AI and assessing the areas where AI might be the most, at a sort of administrative level, where AI might be the most sort of, might make the biggest difference in reaching goals. And I wonder if that idea resonates with folks in terms of the sort of the state as a technical assistance provider, the state as a pass-through funder, the state as a convener of sort of the technical expertise and the people who need that technical expertise, and helping to draw some of those lines. Does that idea? I also sort of was rambling there. If it needs more, if it didn't make sense, let me know as well. Or does that not sound like something that people would need? Is that?
Yeah. So
I think.
Oh, go ahead.
Go, Ryan. I was going to refer to something you said, so go ahead.
No, well, I was just trying to understand it more.
Sure.
So like up here globally, that that makes sense. I was just trying to figure out literally how it works. Is it
with the Resilience Partnership? What it does is there's sort of two tracks. Number one, there's a pot of funding that was started with federal money that now has been supplemented with state dollars through the general fund for the second or third round here, to which communities can apply to implement portions of their sort of resilience plan, of their long-term comprehensive planning, of their infrastructure resilience pieces. And then there's a separate pot that is around sort of regionally based coordinators and sort of giving money and sort of with the mandate to help municipalities within a certain sort of geographic region get ready to improve the way that they operate from a resilience and sort of climate and planning perspective. And I think the idea on the AI front is to fold in a sort of separate track of that has to do with, you're a municipal government. What are the 5 ways that AI could most help you in your day-to-day sort of business operations? And then potentially have a recommendation around, here's maybe a way to access some money to go out and do those things, but to just at the very baseline to say, what are the ways that we can that we can even go out and use these things? Because there's such a wide breadth of different potential applicable use cases that are going to be different for different groups. And so to just have the regional minded approach that and to provide that technical assistance to lead people through, like, here's the universe of different ways and here's the 5 ways that are most applicable to you. Does that make more sense?
It does a little bit. I mean, I'm trying to find out, I'm trying to understand where the expertise is. So, you know, is the state, in your example, is the state the funder? We've got a pool of money that Monmouth can apply to help us assess what our AI, needs are. Who's giving the expertise? That's the piece I'm struggling with.
So it's a little bit of both. There is that piece. The town of Monmouth has a bridge that got washed out and they want to rebuild it. Here's a way to get some money to do that. Number 2 is for consultancy groups, for technical expertise, for vendors who have specific regional area of expertise. There's a separate sort of program where the state helps fund them to go out and work with a subset of regional based communities to go do some of the big sort of planning work and baseline work around how to get ready to do some of these things. And I think the technical assistance and that sort of second piece is the area where I feel like for our municipal governments is really valuable, of just winnowing down the huge amount of potential options to the things that are best suited for you and your region and your community. And I think what we're talking about in the public sector subgroup is how do we replicate that idea, but for tech improvements, AI solutions. And I wonder if there's a sort of a similar conversation to be had with school at the district and sort of administrative level. But I leave that open. I'm not, just gonna.
How's that different, Beth, or maybe Beth could talk about, you talked at our last meeting, we talked about the idea of either planting a lot of people or going to a regional or something. Is it similar to that, Dan?
It very well could be. Yeah. I mean, if I'm again just getting to throwing seeds out there to see what sticks. It's very much the shotgun approach here, and to see sort of if there are ideas that people think are resonant and would be well received and would sort of meet school and district needs. So
so I think it sounds like there's a couple things that I think there's good in them. When I look at sort of the idea of the resiliency and thinking about how it might translate here and in what the municipals might do, I like the idea of incorporating perhaps our particularly K-12. I don't speak for the others, like if that, but like in our PK to 12 public school districts, like our the ability to, and perhaps with funding, like given some funding to do some planning and auditing of their system. One of the things we've done with cybersecurity in our SAUs is to do that. It's to say, like, here's a little bit, when we've had some isolated funding, here's a little bit of funding. Look at what your system is. Where are the areas where you could invest and get the most bang for your buck, whatever the expression is, and then there's an additional pot of funding to apply for where you make that case of like why there's that need. And so from an infrastructure point of view, which this seems like different from the educational conversation we've been having, or instructional piece, could be very useful to SAUs, because the fact is that AI is affecting all administrative pieces, and education certainly is that, and so, and has needs in that way for efficiencies and using that, and not, so I think that's great. And if something could come out of this group that gives folks SAUs that, I would never want that to overshadow or take the place of more like from this group meaty educational recommendations. So maybe it's like adding the public education system to that kind of recommendation around municipalities or something like that. Because then I think the piece that like you were talking about, Ryan, is like what we talked about last time around either regional or SAU level instructional support is different from that. And I don't think I understand how things work, but it would be great in our recommendations if we kept those separate, that there's a need for instruction, infrastructure, administrative level understanding that isn't education specific, but more like business, not that education is, you know what I mean? Yeah. And then there's the instructional and educational piece of it that we've really dug into in this group.
I do think some of that business piece will come from that I mean, if you give everyone the foundation, I mean, this is where I've moved to anyway, is if you give everyone that foundational knowledge, then they will figure out those pieces. So my admin has that foundational knowledge, and she's figured out things to do in her day-to-day job that would have never occurred to me ever. And same thing, me in finance, I'm doing things. And so I'm love that. Anything that supports that foundational knowledge. How about the second piece though? How about the regional network, the specifics of the teacher training that we talked about, that other piece? Let's not forget about that one. So are we looking for a recommendation there that would formalize that training at a regional level, or however we would
A
You
lot
would
of that
propose
already
something like that?
exists, like there's already 16 different hubs with lead districts and educators that are beginning to share training specific to computer science integration, but many of them are beginning to edge into artificial intelligence as well. So that already exists. So I don't know if that's something that we want to say should be amended, should be added to.
Built on, yeah.
Well, and I
But-
think the key is like what's great about Maine is that we have these structures in place. And so, but what the opportunity here is to prioritize that and perhaps recommend funding be dedicated to that, because those structures are in place, but the support that is given is based on resources that are available, and that differs based on timing and
Is the
budget.
structure that you would, so I love building off that. Is the structure of the support you would provide, is it human capital? Is it we recommend we hire X number of people to provide training? Or is it, what we're getting ready to roll out is, we're gonna do a series of different grants for you to reimagine your course, to reimagine gen ed, to all of those type of things. Is it one versus the other? Or is it both?
I think there's a a large and growing body of data that suggests the importance of, or that supports, not suggests, the efficacy of coaches. And so I think that we have an opportunity to build off of that research and what we're seeing as best practice around really having impact in education is having that. And so investing in a model where we would, it would be human capital, where we would either, a model where the state funded these regional coaches, that then their job was to go out and work in each of the SAUs. I would just make a plug. We can't do one-to-one because we know that the regions are very not proportional. So we need to make sure that we're looking at that, but because certain regions have the majority of the population, while other regions are very large and require a lot of travel. So we need to consider those things. But if we could make a recommendation where the state provided something like that, that would then go to schools, it would be that structure creates a very clear number or bottom line that we'd be looking at, versus saying something of like, depending on what schools asked for or what they developed, or there would be different structures at the local SAU level. That would be something that we could do across the board, perhaps. And then we provide training to whoever those identified coaches are, and then their job would be to work in the schools on a regular basis. I also think that a program like you're talking about, Ryan, where SAUs look at, and that might build off of what Dan was talking. So maybe there's a program that is like the resiliency that has two sections. One is around infrastructure and administration, and the other is around the teaching and learning instructional aspect of it, where then they could identify within our system what we really need is blank. So I would suggest that is likely professional development and not a thing. Whereas like the administrative piece might be different, but like when we talked about infrastructure for cybersecurity, it might have been updated servers because they were not, and pieces that really could be something that was like purchasable. But I suspect that what we're going to look at is what they're going to identify is we need more training, we need specifics, we need resource development, and that could all be rolled into the role of these regional coaches, that they could be creating resources and providing that to our SAUs.
What does the regional coaches model look like? Like how many? I know they're not equal. I learned that. So what would be like? What could we recommend? I mean, probably it's not everything on day one, but if it was, what's it look like?
Yeah, ideally, if you said, I mean, there are 16 regions, you could say like 20 coaches statewide would be needed. And again, knowing that we might not start there on day one, but and that then they would likely report, to the department, like they would be responsible for reporting to the department to, meet the deliverables of the funding expectation, that they would be trained, then that, the department would then be responsible for providing them with training and support. And then they would be delivering and reporting to us on resource creation and professional development delivered. And I would imagine that professional development would be delivered in a number of different ways, creating, you know, courses and asynchronized settings, that it would be creating web-based offerings so that people who are not available, you know, in person, and then in-person visits to the school regularly. If this would be somebody's full-time job to be a coach, there's a lot of options and opportunities for that work to be built out and done in there.
So
And really, I guess I would say too, when we talk about AI, it's important to remember in education, and Ruth has said this, that it's really, it covers, when we talk about AI, we're talking about in education, computer science and cybersecurity and digital citizenship, really. And I think that that's going to get a lot of integration in our schools.
And I just want to, that's really exciting, Beth. And I just want to point out, I'm concerned that we're edging towards reinventing what's already out there in schools. Like we've already got these teachers that are teacher leaders that have been trained, that are teaching other teachers in their districts across the 16 counties through Workforce Ready 2030. So I just don't want to have to reinvent what's already out there through private funding, through the Alphon Foundation that MMSA has created at the department as well. Like I would love to partner with the department to see how can we add additional capacity to that and grow it across the, and continue to grow that existing program rather than having parallel programs.
I think that's important. I just think that we have built structures, incredible structures based on the limits that we have. And so having teacher leaders in our schools is amazing. The opportunity to have coaches in our regions that are full-time dedicated to this work is incredible. And so building off of the models and structures that we have, but also understanding that we ask a lot of our teachers, and it's a model we do too. So I'm not criticizing it, it's what we need to do. But when we have them as teacher leaders that can do that, it's not a supported model in the education system. Schools, SAUs don't have funds for that, and so it varies depending on what we can offer and provide in that way. And so I just think with the opportunity of a task force to really look for what are we aiming for, and of course building on, as we've said, the existing structure, I think gives us a leg up, because we're not saying, as some states have in different areas when they built coaches, they're building from the ground up. They've got nothing. And so we already know we have educators out there who might be interested in becoming full-time coaches, who could be leaders within their SAUs to partner with these coaches. Like we have a really good foundation in Maine because of the work that's been being done by our partner organizations and the department over the last several years. So I absolutely acknowledge that, and don't want us to then lose the opportunity to create something even more sustainable for our schools.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I mean, I think pumping additional support in so that some of those educators that have already been the leaders can take on those coaching roles, whether that's going to be full-time, or maybe there's some teachers that want to take on that half-time, and another one. I think there's many different ways to think about what that model could look like.
And do we have a similar model to transfer knowledge from the higher education landscape, like coaches coming from the UMaine system, for example?
It's a great question.
Definitely. And we've in the past partnered with the university to develop coaching, like training. And so we could do, to really work to create a program or something where we could collaborate and coordinate that work, as we've done before with math coaches and literacy coaches. And
I'll just,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, this is, again, my visibility into somewhat of what the other groups are talking about is a very similar conversation happening sort of across the board around leveraging expertise from our public and private sort of university systems here in the state. And again, just going back to the public sector group who are thinking about how to support municipalities, I think there's a very similar idea percolating in that group around convening sort of a clearinghouse hub of folks who have students or researchers or folks who are looking for real world experience at the in academia and municipal governments that are looking to try to deploy AI in interesting ways. And again, I think there's a really strong overlap between a lot of the potentially identified problems and some of the solutions here. So all that to be said, all these ideas, we're sort of somewhat siloing ourselves here a little bit, but these are similar conversations and similar solutions are being proposed in lots of different settings. And so when we eventually sort of pull this all into one big thing, I think the goal is that we'll be able to find where those lines sort of cross, and we can continue to identify easy overlaps and additions there. So very happy to.
How do we want to close the loop on this because a lot of our recommendations, you know, the toolkit, I think we can fill in the narrative around that and stuff, but if this one is going to be, we should hire people, X number in these kind of places, we need a little more, we do want to be more specific, at least for this piece. How do we want to, what are thoughts on how we come up with something specific here?
Do these recommendations want numbers at this point, or what level of detail are they at?
I think we are okay to leave it slightly more vague in terms of numbers. I think we don't need to necessarily have a specific price tag and at this stage. And I think that's largely where we go back to the group in the fall and say, you know, each of the 6 groups has come up with 8 to 10 ideas, and that's a pretty staggering list. And sort of where are we prioritizing, and what is the list of sort of first, second, and third steps here. So I think the germ of the idea seems really great and really strong, and I think we can continue to work with that and fine tune it and bring it back to the co-chairs in the group to try to potentially attach real numbers if folks are okay with that level of specificity at this time.
How about other we're down our last 15 minutes or so, but so we did professional development, we picked up a few other places in there, but are there other areas that we haven't discussed that, you know, are we got to get that in our list?
Yeah, so I just jump in with, you know, thinking about this idea around guardrails for equity, privacy, and transparency around AI, and you know, needing to have proactive policies that really, you know, look at the unexamined bias, misuse of student data, undermining trust in systems of AI and others. And so I would suggest that we make a recommendation to develop a state level AI ethics and equity framework for education. Perhaps there's the need and for an ethics and equity framework that is created, and then an area for education that covers bias auditing, explainability, equitable access. I think those would be really key, and really ensure. Yeah, so I think that would be something I would love for us to recommend.
Yeah,
Security would be a great add-in to that. I do these learning sessions, and more than half the questions I get afterwards are people who have student data and want to know what can I do with it? Where can I use it? Can I use it in Gemini over here? Because we have a service level agreement with Google, but we don't with ChatGPT. So maybe I can't use it in this tool. So I love that one. Love that.
Yeah, I really, really love that idea. And I think it's going to be something that educators could really, really benefit from, and actually probably beyond educators too. In our last few minutes too, I think one thing that we had hit upon before that I wanted to bring back up is that workforce education connection. And might there be some ways that one of our recommendations can highlight providing some kind of support or some form of tools, maybe it's an expansion of the toolkit that shows how AI exists in current STEM workforce sectors. We have a lot of that within the natural resources sector already available that we can elevate, but I know that there's a lot more to be done. So that might be something, I know educators would really value that, so they can see how it connects and why it would matter to their families.
Is that highlighting use? I mean, one of the things that one of the things, I love Beth's toolkit, and we've got a version of that, not quite as good, so I've got to up my game now. But one of the things, like Dan talked about the 2.0, what our vision next is, one, we'll put it into a website where it makes sense. Right now, it's, you know, it's 3 pages off from something else. But then we want to put in the specific, you know, we want to add videos and content in there.
Right.
So here's literally someone using it in a classroom or creating curriculum, whatever it is, just because that's when people get excited, is they see the use case that is relevant to them. And so we want to bring some of those to our kind of one-stop as well.
Yeah, I think that'd be fantastic. Even if it's just videos, it doesn't have to be youth-centered, but catered to the audience of youth. For, you know, for example, we have one that highlights the use of AI in Hancock Lumber, and how the automators are using AI there. And just to kind of help teachers understand, they know Hancock Lumber, they know the lumber mills, but they didn't know about all the AI that has to go into that, and what kinds of skills they're looking for people that they employ, and how those employees then utilize the AI when they're in that kind of a sector. And so that's the story that these STEM in Maine videos show. So we only have a few. There's a lot more that could be done, probably even better. But it's just a nice tool for educators to use, and I think honestly for the public to use, to understand why bother in education, even for these traditional economies.
So that kind of builds off of my third recommendation was that we create an AI and education innovation hub and grant program that would really support these locally driven pilots, professional learning communities, resource development that's happening, and house it in one place, so that it's not kind of who you're connected to, but like all the stuff at the university and the partners, everything would be under this, and then we could encourage more of it through like a grant program that might be, you know, that could get featured on there to build out the resources that we need. But the first step with that would be gathering all of the existing resources into one hub, and then identifying, okay, where are places that we should be creating? And Ruth and I talk about this regularly, but it's like, how do we not duplicate the efforts, but use who we have to make sure, oh, you're doing this, we're doing like, how do you kind of be more strategic in that? And I think, you know, certainly the public wants that as far as fiscal responsibility. So how can we, this could be a way to really do that and show a unified statewide approach to that, and encourage the building out of the existing resources from our local communities.
Yeah.
I love that all the ideas are really just about sharing great ideas that people are already doing. That's excellent. Other ideas, other gaps?
One thought that I think did come up, I think Ruth, you brought it up in a prior meeting. I might have that wrong, but there was a sort of a question around monitoring how AI is impacting education and how to measure that. And I think that's I mean, I know we've already referenced a couple of times some of the recent studies, and some of the things are, you know, where the science and where the research is pointing. And I'm wondering if there's any piece of that should belong in this ultimate work here, or if that gets folded in with some of the sort of regional teacher development and some of the sort of bigger picture things. I think it's a really interesting idea, and again, popping up in a couple of other places, and just wanted to throw it out there for folks to consider.
No, it's a great question. And I think the problem is that it's evolving so rapidly, right? And so, you know, we feel like we're constantly having to keep an eye on the research, and keep an eye on the, you know, corporate sector, to understand what they're really pushing hard, and then how's it going to influence education. And I wonder if there might just something within the recommendations. I don't know if it needs a laser point on it or anything like that, but how do we make sure that we're revisiting what we're doing, and that we're revisiting every 2 or probably 2 years, because it's moving so quickly, but revisiting every 2 years to write a report on, okay, here's the status of AI in education generally. I don't necessarily know if I want to, like, head into a census or a landscape analysis of any kind, but because I know how expensive those can be, but I think and difficult for educators too, but I think might there just be a general understanding or more like a case study approach. We're looking to see, all right, what's actually happening? What are the dangers? What are the opportunities every 2 years?
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think also, which we haven't explicitly stated, but I would imagine would get in there, is like it that goes along with that continuous improvement and evaluation is just really thinking about the opportunity for the data that we'll collect around this work, so that we're really learning. One of the challenges of local control is the lack of statewide data. And so this is a real opportunity to understand that and ensure that we are serving the whole state and the sort of equity piece, and that it's being really evenly distributed or appropriately distributed. So I just make a plug for that always. We hadn't talked about that.
Like, I mean, what kind of level of data collection would the state be able to do? Like, I mean, because I think if there's interest in that, might there be a way for us to, I don't know, guide the type of data collection in any way, shape, or form?
I mean, I think we can, yes, we can. That's what I'm suggesting, I think, is that we can sort of, and I know we don't have time to figure that out now, and I'm hoping we don't need that level yet, but when we get there, to be able to really establish what that is, because that's generally how we would do it at this. It would be sort of like, what do we want to know so that we can ensure the continuous improvement and evaluation of that, and then ask for that up front in the participation.
Great, thank you.
Anything else?
Ryan, do you have other specific ideas that you know you've been shepherding us, but anything that you have in your mind that you want to make sure we say?
I think most of them we check. I mean, I had three, so and there are pieces of them in all of them. So I had the professional development, some kind of professional development network piece, and the idea of you know, potentially you know, cohorts and all of that. We're really trying to identify you know, more AI leaders across the system, folks like myself that can take on some of these trainings. And so just this week, we identified 3 more people who are going to sign up for these AI trainings. And so we're always looking to scale. And so that's what we're thinking about. How can we, you can't get anyone to do anything. Actually, I won't say that. Forget, these are being recorded. So I will say I need to incent people to do stuff. And so I'm looking for grants and ways to do that. And so anyway, all of it falls under that kind of professional development category, which I think is a little bit different in higher ed, but not that different from you know, maybe just on a slightly different scale. I had this idea of this AI literacy framework, which again almost gets back into this training piece, which is this. I really believe that this applying this foundational level of knowledge to everyone and anyone is at least what we're adopting, and we're starting to see those benefits already. And so some guidelines for that, and I actually had wrote creating a toolkit and then put a little check mark when Beth shared hers. And then the last one I had, again, I've touched already twice, which was this one-stop shop. This, you know, we've got, you know, I feel like we're leading out there, but even our one-stop shop is like a 9-stop shop. It's, you know, it's a little bit over here and a little bit over there, and some really great examples on this page. And we just need to really take the time and pull them all together and then promote that site. I've got I've got 190 people on a chat GPT class in an hour, and I'd love to be able to say, hey, go to this resource, share this resource with you, because that's a hooked audience already. I can point them in the direction. I know they're going to follow that site. And so we just need to organize some of the good work we've done that's in a bunch of places. And I think a statewide site like that, I think maybe like Connecticut has one that I saw once where, you know, if I'm just if I'm Ryan's mom and I want to know where I can go to learn a little bit of, you know, the educator version of a toolkit, where can I go? And I think something like that could be valuable as well.
Great. Maybe with our last 2.5 minutes here, I'll just quickly say a minute about next steps here. I really want to, first of all, I appreciate all the hard work over the last hour, but really over the last 6 months or so that this group has put in surfacing some of these great ideas, in really being fantastic thought partners here about how Maine can continue to grow and you know, hopefully to lead on a lot of these issues here going forward. As I sort of said towards the beginning, we're gonna sort of let you all off the hook for a month or so, a month and a half, and we reconvene with the larger group at the first week in September. So at that time, what largely that's shaping up to look like, although it's a little in flux still, is likely a survey of some of the ideas, some of the specific recommendations, some of the insights that came out of the conversations like the ones that we've had over the last couple of months. So what it's going to look like over the next month or so in the meantime is Scott and myself and a couple other folks from the governor's office side are going to take what you've all written here, what Ryan is going to throw into ChatGPT and send me in a little bit here from our conversations, and turn them into something sort of synthesized and a little cleaned up and a little more sort of like a draft set of potential recommendations. We will try to get those out to folks in the next few weeks here, so you can get eyes on it before we come back as a larger group. That is largely going to be the maybe the only touch point that we have really until we reconvene in September. Questions on that, or does that set of steps make sense for this group?
Definitely. Fantastic conversation today.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Ryan, and thanks everyone for participating, and we'll hear from us soon, hopefully, as soon as we can get our arms around some of these great ideas.
Thanks for all you
Thanks,
do.
everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Great month of fun. Bye.